Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be combining these two masks. As you can see, I've already cut the face off of this one. And we're going to be doing something like this. I don't know if I'm going to use the whole face, probably just half of it. And what we're going to do is basically try to recreate sort of our own version of the end scene mask from Halloween 2, when his face is... It's not going to be totally accurate or anything. This blank was actually painted and haired by me, but I didn't really like how it came out. And it definitely has more of a Halloween 1 style, but I'll get around to doing more weathering as we go on. I think it'll be really cool when it's done. So one quick thing is, this is the sketch that I did. Just ignore these other ones, they're done out of boredom. This is basically the concept art for this mask. I also did some in Photoshop, but I'm not really going to be using that for reference. That was more just for fun. So I'm just going to take a ballpoint pen. I'm not going to use a Sharpie or anything because I don't want really thick lines. And I'm just going to kind of lightly mark where I want to cut. So in the reference picture, it looks like I've got the eyes definitely going to be missing, so I'll roughly mark where I want that to be cut. I'll just do little points and then I'll connect them later. Looks like a good chunk of the forehead, maybe have that connect up into the hairline. And then I also have quite a bit of the nose missing, so we'll probably do something like this. Maybe have it come around, so this whole thing would be exposed. And then we'll just sort of bring it up and around. We'll do that for now. I'll probably make more adjustments later. I've just got a normal pair of scissors, so nothing too special. You can use cuticle scissors or whatever, but personally I'm just going to use them. Also, if you are doing anything like this, make sure that when you're cutting, you cut a little too small first, because you can't really put anything back. You can only take away. So just be very careful and cut a little bit at a time. Alright, so I'm just sort of holding the whole thing together. It's not glued or anything, but this is sort of what I want my end product to look like. It's just a very quick test to sort of see how everything will fit together. It looks like they're proportioned pretty similarly, so it looks like it'll work pretty well. I might do some cuts and tears around the edges and probably do some heavy stippling with latex, and it'll get pretty crazy. And then I'm thinking I'll probably do mesh in the eyes. Now if you're wondering, this is not a very expensive blank or anything. I think there was actually it might have been a fail cast. I don't know, it seemed kind of lopsided when I got it. It was like 30 bucks, so it's not too expensive. Even if I completely ruin this thing, it's not a big deal. And I don't know who made it, unfortunately, but it is, for the price, it's pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and make some quick final adjustments. Also, look how damn thick this thing is. It should be about half that. Hopefully that just means it'll be more durable. Another very important thing, if you are going to do something like this, is to make sure that you have some overlap between the two masks. I have all this leftover flesh that I'm going to use for glue points. If you make it the exact same size as the hole, you're not going to have anywhere to glue it. It's just going to, it's just not going to work. It should line up with about that edge when it's all said and done. So I'll always keep that in mind whenever I'm doing stuff like this, is make sure you have points where you can actually glue it. Speaking of glue, the kind of glue we're going to be using is E6000. This is just very strong, clear, industrial strength glue that is super awesome because it sticks really well to things like latex, and it should be plenty strong enough to hold this in, since I'm going to be careful with this thing anyway. I'm not going to be throwing it around. Seriously, if you've never gotten some of this stuff and you're a mask maker, I definitely recommend it because it bonds really well. I use it for hair all the time. This thing's hairline was done with that stuff. You can see it's pretty clean. Anyway, the way I would usually do something like this is I'd get my face, apply maybe a strip of glue down the side or a couple dabs, put it on the inside and clamp that, and I'd probably do the gluing points separate from each other. I don't want to do it all at once because that would just be very difficult to do well, because you're going to want to use something like a clamp or something, like those kitchen clamps that hold bags shut. Let me get the first point glued and then I'll be back after it's in. So quick update on the mask. I've got it kind of propped up like this because I ended up redoing the part that I glued in because the face inside was sort of sagging. It looks a little weird right now because it's at a weird angle, but I promise once it's actually propped up it'll look much better. That's being glued right now, and then after it's dry I'll probably do a couple more glue points. I experimented with actually burning the same latex that the mask is made with. I just used a piece like this, although I threw it away. And I found out that even after like an hour after I burned it, the latex never really dried. Like it caught on fire, it turned black and bubbly and cool, and then it just kind of stayed sticky and wet. So I was considering actually burning this thing, but if anything, I'll probably just do like light singeing. I don't think I'll actually be burning it too much. I'll just have to do that with latex paint. Alright, so I've got the face pretty much in place on my mannequin head, and I've gone ahead and I've taken a hairdryer and I've sort of flared the edges of the latex, which does a couple things. It gives it a little more dimension, volume, and it also reveals a little bit more of the fleshy. The next step in this process would be painting. There's a couple ways that you can do that. My favorite way is you mix the acrylic first, so you get a good color, get the exact color that you want, and then you mix that with latex. I tend to do about 50-50 paint latex. I find that works pretty well, although you can play with those numbers a little bit. I actually ended up cutting the eye out. I'll probably do eye mesh in place of where the eye used to be. I put it on, and it was just kind of digging into my eye, so that's why I did that. Right now what I'm about to do is I'm about to coat these edges in E6000. I'm going to try to shape them and make them look like they're kind of bubbling and gross. I might do that in a couple other spots on the mask as well, just to make it look a little more burnt and disgusting. Okay, so we're in the paint workshop, and the mask looks a little warped right now. It's just because of the mannequin head that it's on. I don't know, something happened, but it's fine. I've got the edges sort of coated with that glue. It will give them a bit more of a rough appearance. I think I'm going to do a bit of detail work on the flesh here. So I'm going to first get some kind of paint mixing container. Got this soda can. This should do the trick. If you ever have soda cans and you don't know what to do with them, paint mixers, they're great, or just using for holding chemicals and stuff, because nothing really dissolves them. Well, nothing that you should be making masks with anyway. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to mix paint before we mix in the latex. Always shake up your acrylic paints. So we'll just get some red in there. This red is kind of thick, but for today's purposes, that will not really matter that much. Got this kind of gross brown color here, so I'll throw a little bit of that in. This doesn't have to be super precise or anything, it's all taste. But this is kind of slightly bluish red. Whoops, that was a lot. It's okay, we're gonna make it work. And then I've got some plain black, so I'll throw that in as well. You'd be surprised at how little black it takes to darken something. And I'm gonna mix up my paints. This is looking pretty good. I think I'm gonna want more red though, so I'll add that. Let me see if I have any red back here. Now for some applications of the paint, you actually don't need latex. It really depends on what you're doing. For what I'm about to do, I might not use any, but we'll see. I'm just gonna kind of generally apply it. This is kind of a cartoony red color in some areas, which I'm not really a fan of. And I mean, this was probably painted by either a machine or a board factory worker, so we gotta kind of fix what they didn't do. I'm not really using any techniques right now, I'm just painting how I see fit. That looks pretty good in my opinion. At least it's better than what it looked like before. Ooh, we got some artifacts here. That's okay, it's gonna get really disgusting anyway, so. That's the nice thing about doing these messier masks, is that it's really hard to actually mess them up, because sometimes you just have like accidents and it honestly ends up being fine, so that's kinda nice. Now I'm gonna take some of my black. I think I'm gonna go around these edges, and maybe I'll add a little bit on the inside. But I actually do want to mix this one with latex. So I think this is a Gatorade cap or Smart Water cap. That'll work. Just a bit of black. And I'm mixing this with latex because this will be on the edge more, which means it's likelier to come into contact with things, and I don't really want it to come off. Latex is a very forgiving material, so I really love to work with it. The only downside is it doesn't last very long. Even the best quality latex masks only last for, you know, a couple decades, and they've pretty much dissolved. Alright, so I'm just going to hit this. It might look gray when it's wet, but it's definitely going to look black when it's dry. This edge would definitely be pretty charred. And that glue is paying off. It definitely looks really cool. to create sort of a singed effect on the hair, I think I'll do a couple droplets of black in the hair. There we go. Keep going. Nothing really to it. Just takes patience. And I usually try to be pretty thorough with stuff like this. I know I'm not really, being too precise for the most part. Just kind of letting the paint go where it wants to, but I'm at least trying to be consistent and getting all the areas that I want covered. Because the last thing I'd want is like, raw latex showing through or whatever, because that would just not look very professional. But as far as any other colors showing through, that's fine. Blood or whatever. Here, let me pull this away from the teeth, just for now. So I think that looks pretty good. And then the inside, I honestly think I'm going to hit the inside with this red. There's some raw latex color on the inside of this mask. Now, part of me was tempted to sculpt my own sort of half-melted face to put in this thing, but I figured it would just be too much work, to be honest, for a one-off project. Although I might start selling, my own custom bust version of this or something in the future. We'll see. I think we'll take more of the red, and because this would take place after the ending of Halloween 2, these of course got the blood tier, so we'll take some of this red color. If I remember correctly, it comes down kind of like this, and then it kind of, I'm just going to go over the white spots again. I don't really want any bright white, except for maybe the teeth in some areas. That's okay. And you know what? I'm going to do some blood trailing out of the mouth, because if this was any, I think there should be some blood. I really like how this is coming out so far. I think I'm going to sort of let this dry a little bit, and then I'll come back to it later to see what other adjustments I'd like to make. So I'll be back in, I don't know, 10 minutes or so. Okay, so our paint has pretty much dried. Now what I'm going to do is essentially going to dry brush, or I'm actually going to stipple, rather, using a sponge. This is just, I think this is from a mattress or something, but it's pretty handy stuff. But you can do this with pretty much any sponge. So I'm not going to get it soaking wet, I'm just going to wipe off the excess, and then I'm just going to sort of stipple around the edges of the burnt area. Now I got a little bit much there, so I can just wipe it off. Remember, you can always use the clean side of the sponge to sort of take some of it off if you put too much paint on. Now the reason this doesn't need to be mixed with latex is because it's so thin, it's almost like it's staining the mask. The other stuff that we've done so far was fairly thick, at least that edge area. This is pretty thin, so it shouldn't really come off. But yeah, it's looking pretty cool. I'm trying not to get too many streaks in my paint. You don't want to see much like directional stuff. Okay, I really like that. Do a little bit around the inside of the eye. A little bit up here. So that's what it is now. So another thing that I have is I have some leftover, whatever you want to call this. Thinking about maybe putting it on the cheek or something, or maybe on the forehead. I think forehead would be best, to be honest. Or even the neck. I think maybe the neck on this side would be the best. Yeah. Alright, that's where that's going to go. So I'm going to go ahead and trim this up, and I guess I'll cut a new hole, so I'll have to trace that out. So as you can see, even though my camera's a little bit out of focus, I'm just kind of loosely gluing this in, trying to get it sort of kind of looking alright. This one's a bit tricky to glue in because there's actually some foam padding in the neck that I added so that the neck would flare out a little more, otherwise it would just hug the wearer's neck and it was not comfortable. Yeah, I'm sort of just trying to form fit it to that foam a little bit. If there's any gaps, I think I'll just fill it in with some more E6000 and then paint over it. Should work. Alright, and then I think I'll do, so I'll just get some E6000 in there, maybe a bit here. Just filling those gaps a little better. Alright, I think that's going to hold. So, yeah, we'll just let that sit. I think while we wait, probably going to tear up the edges of the neck a bit with some scissors, maybe add some charring around there. So give me a few minutes while this dries. Alright, so I've added the blood and whatnot to the neck piece. Done lots of dripping, which is pretty simple to do. I just get a ball of, you know, paint on the end of my little stick here, and I just kind of run it down the side of the mask. I really like how this is coming out, actually, more than I thought I would. I've added some charring, a lot of charring actually, you can see to the side of the mask here, and the hair also has a bit of a burned effect, and I did that using this sponge. I just got a bunch of the liquid latex and black paint, and I sort of just dragged it along the edges. I might do a little more just to demonstrate, just like this, and it kind of balled up in the hair nicely, so that created a really neat effect of charring. I also used the brush a bit. I've also added some blood in some areas, just around the outside. I just thought it might make the details pop a little more. Sort of stipple on some black on top so it's not so apparent. You don't want to do too much. Let's turn it around. So relatively normal, and then absolute shitfest. Kind of like a Two-Face almost. Now I'm just kind of adding some neck detail. I went ahead and chopped up the neck. As far as around the hair goes, I'm going really dark. Like back here, I'm going to go really, really dark. Maybe I'll do some more charring on this side. It does need some eye mesh. So you can see what I do with the blood is I just get a considerable amount and I just draw a line with it basically. Sometimes I'll go upwards, which kind of lets it fall a little more naturally. It tends to ball up in certain areas, so you got to keep note of that. Because liquid tends to sort of flow downwards, even if it's on the bottom of the surface. Like blood would trickle down my hand, it wouldn't just fall off here. So you got to keep thinking about that, or it would ball up. I'm going to go ahead and cut it. After I've added the mesh and whatnot, then I will resume. Okay, so it's a few days later. I just haven't really gotten around to working on this thing much. But the paint is pretty much completely dry. I'm noticing that this isn't very shiny in the areas that it should be. Now there's a couple ways you can get a nice sheen. Some people have used stuff like, I think rubber cement. Okay, so I don't know if you can see very well. Let me get this thing closer. But I've actually added some gloss to the teeth. You can see that creates a really nice effect. And I just did that using my E6000. So, I'll do a little bit on the nose here. I'm just sort of tapping it on. That's way too much. Yeah, the cap on mine doesn't really fit properly, so sometimes you get this nasty dry globules. Is that a word? Yeah, I'm just going to sort of tap it on. As you can see, there's really nothing to it. I'm going to do a bunch right below the eye, because I feel like that would be a moist area. I also did a kind of a strand going between the tooth and the lip of the mask. I thought that looked really cool. Like his face is sticking to the mask. You just do that by pulling strands across like this. This is a pretty common effect that you'll see with old zombie flicks and stuff, is they've got like strands of goo. See that? It looks really neat. It's just wet stuff. If any of you have ever gotten a burn or seen a nasty burn, or even like road rash, it usually gets pretty slick with, I don't know, pus or something. It's going to give the mask a bit more detail as well. It'll look a little more interesting. So yeah, that's really cool. Let me do some rotating so you can see. And it's going to dry exactly like that. It's not going to lose any sheen once it dries, which is super awesome. Now, I'm not sure, because I haven't done this in a while, but I'm pretty sure that if you take like a blow dryer or something to this, that it can cause it to be matte, or if you tamper with it too much, it can cause it to be matte, which we don't want, because then there's basically no point of adding it. So just keep that in mind when you're working with it. You kind of want this, you want to kind of leave it alone after you've got it in place, so that way the surface will kind of smooth out and give you that nice sheen. And I know these strands are really thin, but this stuff is tough when it dries. It is just, it's like rubber bands. Oh yeah, and then the neck wound as well. This will make the colors look a little more rich in some areas, and it will also help seal in the paint, well, it won't peel as easily. I'm going to go over some of this blood that we did earlier, just to make it look shiny. Usually you'd want to use just a glossy blood in the first place, but this will work just fine. You probably don't want to handle this stuff too much or breathe its fumes, because it does smell kind of bad. So I'd recommend, if you're going to be handling it, using gloves. I don't really care about my health too much, so I'm not too worried about it, but pretty sure this stuff is like cancer causing, so be careful. Alright, I'm going to call that portion of this done. So it's time to just let this sit, and then I'll get back to you when I'm ready to put the eye mesh in. I just briefly want to show you how strong this stuff really is. I got a little bit on my finger here, and just look at how much it stretches. Like, look at that. Still going, still going. Yeah, and only a little bit came off actually, so it's really, really stretchy stuff. I guess that's probably part of why it's called industrial strength. Okay, so as a final touch, I think I'm going to add some eye mesh to this thing, and I've got this old Halloween mask hood. I don't know what mask this came from, but if you ever see these cheap Halloween mask hoods, it's pretty much just black see-through material that can totally work for eye mesh. And I mean, look how much of it I have. This will last for, God, a dozen masks at least, right? So I think I'll just kind of eyeball the size and glue it in using some E6000. So let me go ahead and pull this thing off of the head underneath. I've got some plastic bags inside, so I'm stuffing it out. Let me see. It should come off. There's also, I don't know. I guess that's some more. Oh yeah, that was to like test it out. So now we've got our mask. Just holding this thing feels really cool. So you can kind of see already what it would look like with the eye mesh, with the eyes black like that. Fuck, I'm excited. So that's my dog barking. I'm sure you can hear it. There's a child screaming outside. My God. And we're just gonna cut off, I don't know, a couple square inches of fabric. That should be plenty. We just turn it like this and get a little bit of our glue. So we'll just, it's gonna be hard to show you this, but get a little bit of our glue. And I like to do like each of the four corners, do a pretty decent amount so that it stays on. And then we'll pick a bit of fabric. And it's okay if a little bit gets on the fabric because there's already strands of nasty stuff going across the eye, so that'll just add to the effect. I'll have to be a little more precise on the other one, but so yeah, so I just pressed it in there, and I'm probably going to reinforce it later. I'm not going to try to do them both at the same time. I just don't want to deal with trying to get them both to stay in there. But yeah, so we'll do that one first. We're just kind of lightly getting it in there, and then I'll wait, I don't know, 10 minutes, and I'll finish gluing it in after that 10 minutes has passed. Maybe a little longer, depends. Whoa. So after that 10 minutes, I'll go ahead and do the other one, and then I'll show you the finished product. Alright, so it's the next day, and here it is in all its glory. I really like how it came out personally. There are maybe a few things I'd change, like its wearability, but overall, I'm really happy with how it looks. overall, I'm really proud of this thing. You can see the eye mesh came out pretty good. This one's a little folded, I guess. That's just due to how the mask is shaped, but it's alright. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed watching this, and maybe you'll do something similar with your Myers mask. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.